It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, February 7th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is so thrilled the Flyers got back in the W column.
Yeah, they got back on track.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on the app formerly known as Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your best bet of $5 or more wins. Visit fanduel.com/locked on to get started. You can find us for free over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get the latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, on yesterday's show, we talked about, what Owen Tippett's return to the lineup would mean. And it meant, of course, that Delorier and Lixell were scratched because they went with the 11-7. Of course, Mark Stahl was still scratched as well. I think that, you look at this game and I think I think the 11-7 might have been a factor in the first period being the way that it was just dreadful.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was bad.
and so when you're trying to like get back on track from the break like that, I think you need to have consistent lines. I really do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I saw some of that, but we did warn that it might look ugly coming out of the break anyhow, just because
Yeah,
it had for so many teams. It's not just them. So yeah,
correct.
it's probably a combination of both. But
Yeah.
they didn't fall too far behind, so that was good for them.
Yeah, and I think, we'll talk about Sam Ersson and him being the major reason why, but I do want to talk about the fact that they did get back on track and very decisively as well. And this was such an important win. It was a really good win. We talked yesterday specifically about Florida and how it's really hard to come from behind against them. The Flyers managed to do that. They didn't have far to go, but they did nonetheless, and managed to hold on to the lead. Despite not being that great in 6-on-5 situations in either direction.
Right.
So
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And at times, Florida was kind of like punishing, had the puck a lot. But, the Flyers, as usual, didn't give up. So they really, they gave them a game. The Konechny goal was huge. I mean, that was a great play by him. And
yeah, and by
you know,
Farabee, to be
yeah,
honest.
with the pass, yeah, no doubt. And that's, that was good timing on that play because it was probably starting to look a little bleak, and that really changed things.
Yeah, it did for sure. And it was a goal that was on the rush. And I think
Yeah,
that in order to get back in this game, that's the kind of play that was going to have to happen just because of the way that Florida had been playing up until, a little before that, I would say. The Flyers weren't going to get any chances on a straight come through the neutral zone, get set up. Like they just weren't going to get that kind of opportunity. So it was really good that tying goal came on the rush like that.
yeah, no doubt. I mean, you know, they have been good on the rush all year. Konechny probably still the best on the team at it because he's decisive. He's decisive when
Yes.
he gets down to the goalie, and I think Stolarz played that pretty well too. So I mean, it just wasn't much he could do.
Right, and both goaltenders in this game, I thought, played quite well. Both of them made some tremendous saves. I think that Sam Ersson in particular weathered the storm in that first period to keep the Flyers in it, and that is absolutely for certain. And the way he was talking after the game, like you wouldn't know that he got barrage. Like,
Right.
he was like, "No, that was a good thing. It kept me on my toes, and it got me back into the swing of things." And that's just goalie speak because goalies are weird, but I think that it was really good for him to get a win right out of the gate after the break like this.
Yeah, no doubt. It was a good solid win because there were times when he was going from one side of the post to the other, and the Flyers couldn't get control of the puck. And he can say whatever he wants, but that's not a situation you necessarily want to be in as a goalie because you just don't know where the shots are coming from.
Right, and I think defensively, yeah, I mean, we know they were terrible in that first period, and the Panthers were just, like, going, without any resistance right through the neutral zone and having multiple opportunities, and, of course, they're so good at those quick passes. They were able to get backdoor really easily, and that's why they had so many good chances, and Ersson was there to stop most of them except for that one goal that was on the power play, which
Right.
that power play is that first power play unit is ridiculous. But
It is.
I think that that's what they were able to tighten up later in the game. So the Panthers weren't able to get through the neutral zone as easily. They weren't able to have a chance to get the F2 F3 in position
Right.
very easily to get those multiple quality chances. I mean, they did a little bit in the third period, especially the 6-on-5, but
Yeah.
I would say that the second period, especially, like they just were not getting those chances, and that was
No.
key.
Yeah, that was a big deal. The defense really did rise to the occasion. That was a big deal. I did notice some weird minutes though. Like, I mean, you expect Hathaway to be on the low minute side, but I don't know how it ended. But I know that Cam Atkinson was not getting big minutes, so I don't
Mhm.
know, and I don't know what the reason was for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, if you look at, the time on ice as it wound up in the end, interestingly, Travis Konechny had the most minutes in the game,
Yeah.
with 22, and Sanheim had the most of the defensemen, but with 7 out there, he was under 20 minutes. So
Right.
totally reasonable,
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, Cam Atkinson wound up with 17-28, which was very similar to Sean Couturier. So
So I guess he did. I think from what was happening then is that they were keeping the minutes low for the first period and a half maybe for him, and then started putting him on. So they're managing him. That's fine.
yeah,
I was curious about that.
yeah. And the other thing about Sean Couturier, he was 15-3 on faceoffs, like monster
Yeah.
game at the dot for him.
Well, I think, and again, I'm watching on my phone, right? I think, and watching another game, I do think that he wasn't matching up against Barkov. I think he was matching up against Reinhardt. I think
Yeah,
that's, and he took him to school because Barkov still was at over 70% himself.
right. Paling had a rough night at the dot, let's say, and that's because
Yeah.
they were, matching up. Obviously they were rotating forwards there, but
Yeah.
he was lower in the lineup
So I
and
didn't
had
expect
to
that.
take some of those.
I didn't expect Reinhardt to go up against Couturier, so that was an advantage for the Flyers, for sure.
Yeah, and I think, speaking of Reinhardt, I think the Flyers did a really good job of shutting him down.
Yeah.
I think that was really important for them in this win that, he had 0 shots on goal technically.
Yeah. No, that's a big deal. I mean, considering the kind of season he's having, a very big deal.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. So, and that was, one of the big things we talked about with this game.
Yeah. Yeah. He was one of the guys. We talked about that, that line with Verhage that they let Verhage kind of walk in. But it's a power play, so like I get it. That's the way they were playing it. So
Yeah,
they paid the price on that one. But no, I mean they did a good job. I mean, this is coming out of the break. This is as good as I think a team could look. I mean,
yeah,
not for the whole game, but for like I would say half the game.
Yeah, and John Tortorella said as much in the post-game presser with some a four-letter word slipping through. But I think that all in all, a good night was had, and very happy again to see the Flyers back in the W column. Good to see Sam Ersson have a great game to start off with. Hopefully that bodes well for the next game
That should help
against
them.
Winnipeg. Yeah, I think so. In the meantime, Russ alluded to the fact that he is elsewhere, which is at the Five Nations tournament. And we are going to talk a little bit about what he is watching coming up next.
Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is about scoring the best seat on the couch and grabbing your favorite football snacks and placing some super bets. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm going to have wings on my schedule because it's like, I don't know what the Super Bowl would be like without wings. I'm not sure what the rest of my menu will be yet, but pretty sure some garlic parmesan wings will be in there.
Sounds tasty.
Yeah. Um, this Super Bowl, though, I'm still going to go with the over. I'm looking at all the stats. I even posted some new stats on my website, sportsology.com. They came straight from the NFL. So they're helping everybody out. And I still think it'll be over. The last I looked, it was 47.5. So I think going over, that's a pretty good bet. But there's a lot of other ways, and FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or two or three. Not only can you bet who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if you first bet a $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
On tomorrow's show, we will, of course, preview that next game against the Winnipeg Jets and talk about so much more. Before we get to the Five Nations report, next Winter Classic, Blues versus Blackhawks in Chicago. Womp womp.
I don't know. I think Wrigley's great, though. I mean, I had a good time in that town. I mean, my rental car got hit by a cab, and luckily,
oh my God.
yeah. And I had Chicago is a uncapped parking town, so there's no laws. So I had to pay at that time. I paid I think $75 or $100, but a cab did hit my car, and luckily I had that walk away insurance. So if I didn't have that, ugh. But I still thought it was great, and to this day it was one of the best games in the sense of how the ice was, the speed of it was great, the teams were great, and right above us was one of Vince Vaughn, the actor. He walked out for the anthem and all the introductions in just a long sleeve shirt. That's it. So you can tell he's a true Chicagoan because he didn't even have a jacket on. But then he went back into his into his warm suite after.
Right. Yeah, just, that's definitely the Connor Bedard factor at play there.
Absolutely.
So I get it, but it's still kind of annoying. Anyway, Russ, you are in Michigan, completely different state, for the Five Nations tournament. It's a U18 tournament. It's another one of the events that you watch leading up to the draft, and it involves the U.S., Czechia, Finland, Sweden, and Switzerland teams. There's no winner, correct? It's just round robin games.
No, there's a winner. They do give out the medals and stuff.
Okay. So what have you seen so far?
Yeah, so far, I mean, right now, I haven't seen Czechia yet. The U.S. is terrific. Finland's really good. So on first blush, they look like the two best teams, but Sweden won the first game against Finland in overtime. So you never know. But this tournament, you do have to give these teams time to kind of except for the U.S. team, settle in. They just came in a day and a half ago. They're playing games. They're trying to ramp it right up. They're not all familiar with each other. They're trying to build chemistry. So there is that factor. But some really good play.
Yeah, and so as far as, guys trying to make some additional points on their game or something like that towards the draft. Like, what is the weight that this tournament is given?
Uh, it's pretty good weight because it's international competition. It's mid-season now, so you expect guys to be in mid-season form. Uh, so less than the World Juniors, but more than the All-American Prospects game for sure. So it's and as far as the Holinka, it's a little less than the Holinka because that's so important because that's at the end of the season. But it's got a
Right.
pretty good worth though.
So, as far as those guys that you've seen so far, has anybody stood out?
Yeah. On the U.S. side, I mean, Teddy Steger, we've talked about him. He had 4 points tonight. Switzerland had a rough game, so I can't totally kill them. One of the guys we'll talk about is Lucas Van Vliet. He had a nice game. He's a big physical specimen already. I didn't realize how built he was, and he actually he used to go there when the Plymouth Whalers were playing because he's from Livonia. So he saw Tom Wilson play when he was younger. So
Wow.
that's pretty funny. And so yeah, we chatted about that. But he's a good kid. He's going to Michigan State. He looks like he could be a third line center if he hit his max, maybe a second line center, but probably a third. And I would say he would go late second, early third. That's where I think he's going to go because his points have kept rising all year. So he's picking up a lot more momentum than when he had at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, he is on the U.S. National Team Development Program, so
Yes.
he has the benefit of being part of that, which develops players so well. And so he plays in the USHL and these international competitions, and I think that nowadays you just get an extra boost as a player if you're coming from that program because you're well disciplined and you're
Yeah.
really easy to coach.
Yeah. And one of the keys that they're doing this year that they didn't do every time or every year, they're moving the guys around a lot. So Lucas, if I come in one game, he might be playing top line center. I come in another one, he's playing third line. But they like that versatility because they're seeing a lot of different situations, and it is different. It's different if you play top line. It's different if you play third line. So on this game, he was playing with Baker, who he grew up with. So that's nice for him. He's going to Michigan State with him. They've known each other for many, many years. So this was particularly a lot of fun for him because of that. So, those kinds of things are always nice to see. And I like to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the team from Finland being possibly one of the better teams here, if not the best. And there's a familiar name on that team, Aatos Koivu. That is exactly who you think it is. Well, it could be one of two guys,
Right.
kids, I guess, but it's Saku's kid. Mikko's the uncle. And he has played top line center for Finland in their first game, right?
Yeah, he's playing top line center. He's been playing top line center as well back in Finland. He just debuted as a pro recently and got in some games in Liga. He didn't score any points, but he was thrilled about that. And at such a young age, that's nice. He is doing really well. He's fast. He's a little lean, as a lot of young guys are, but very confident. When he talked about his dad, he really just talked about him in dad terms. His dad hasn't coached him in a little while now, and he's not even sure fully what his dad's up to. He just said, I don't know, something with GPS. I don't know, something. So it's just really funny how he said that, but it's in a way it's good because he's not affected by his dad's success, and I think that's good. And I think he realizes he can create his own success. So when he had 2 points in his first game, he said his goal was just a great setup, and I had an empty net to shoot it in. He was very humble about that, but you know how that is. If you miss it, then you miss, a big portion of the net. So it wasn't a gimme, but it was, one of the ones that, you want a guy to hit. He did. He did have a great assist as well. He showed good speed. His two-way play is good, and he's working on that. like most guys are. So he really
Right.
he right now he's not really on the radar that much. But a big tournament like this, and I think he gets boosted right into the second round based on the lineage, based on the fact that he's starting to play pro. So he's one of these guys that, again, this is the time of year where guys can, start to emerge and pull away from, let's say, the third round pack and really start moving up. So keep an eye on him because, the fact that he's a top line center here, the fact that he's Saku Koivu's kid, the fact that he's good, he just may have just not gotten the right circumstances early in the year to kind of show what he could do. So it might all be clicking for him right now.
Yeah, that is really good to hear. I did watch a little bit of his post-game interview after the first game, and he just sounds super thoughtful, like he really knows the game well and can
He
talk about
does.
it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, we all were kind of peppering him with questions, and he handled it really well, really like a pro. And like you said, very
Mhm.
thoughtful, smart kid. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. We'll talk about more of the guys from this tournament on tomorrow's show. Checking in with Russ in Michigan. In the meantime, we've got some of your mailbag questions, and we will get to them coming up next. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites. They leverage over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day. Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Listeners of Locked On Flyers will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at indeed.com/locked on. Go to indeed.com/locked on right now and support Locked On Flyers by saying you heard about Indeed on this show. That's indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe. So, in the mailbag, our first question is really an amalgamation of many
It's a
comments
big
we
word.
got. Yeah, on well, I like big words sometimes. The many questions or comments we got over on the YouTube channel related to the Flyers goaltending. And really the upshot of the questions is should the Flyers ride out the season with the goaltenders we have and then figure it out in the off season? Or if the Flyers have that cap relief, should they seek out a veteran goaltender to stabilize for now?
I don't think they should seek out a veteran goalie because I think it just causes problems. I think you want to make sure Ersson is the one. And if you seek out a veteran, you don't know how they're going to mesh with Ersson. I mean, at least Cal Peterson knows him, and maybe Cal Peterson isn't great, and we know Ersson's going to play a lot of games anyhow. So I wouldn't upset the apple
Right.
cart.
Yeah, I definitely think you ride it out and figure it out in the off season, and
Yeah.
you want to take a look at what you have as far as the other depth goes, and see how the other goalies are developing, and go from there. I would not be surprised if they signed a veteran goaltender as a backup next off season, but we'll see how that goes. Carl Hamill over on YouTube had a question that's more of like a follow up here. Commented, I would not rule out drafting a goalie early in this draft, especially considering Flyers will have multiple first round picks. Ersson is far from a sure thing.
Yeah, I mean, and MB Arnson has time, and Kolosev, you hope, but again, I still hear things, rumblings out of Russia that Putin could change everything overnight. There's still a threat there, so yes, based on all of those things, it's possible they draft one. They're never going to draft one in the first round. I can tell you that it's an absolute. It won't happen. But from the second round on, sure, I do think it's a possibility. Um, from this tournament, there's actually a lot of goalie coaches, former goalies here watching the goalies in this tournament. So we could talk more tomorrow about the goalies in this tournament, and that's something where Flyers fans should want to look at because, then some of these guys are a possibility. I did see, Danny and his staff here. So, they're here watching.
That is really good to hear because it's important for them to see these guys in person and not just have the scouts information themselves.
Right.
At MP Christ 5701 says, I hear all the hype of these kids in Lehigh and I get excited. Then I look at the standings and ask myself, should they be dominating or are these kids way overhyped? I don't know how to feel other than underwhelmed. And I think that's really like the point we've been making, right?
Yes.
Is that the pieces are there and that's where it comes down to the coaching.
Correct.
We know these kids are skilled and they just haven't been able to put it together and when that happens, it's more often the coaching than not.
Right. I mean, there's some really talented kids down there. Now, you have to know intellectually as a fan and a onlooker that not everybody's going to make it. That's obvious, right? We don't have to tell you that. But better coaching would make them look better too. And not everybody's a superstar. That's obvious too. So it's not like they're going to bring somebody up. They're going to lead the NHL in scoring. But doesn't mean they don't have decent players there. They do. And I do think while some have developed pretty well this year, others are kind of, like in the middle where the next part of this season for the Phantoms is really important for them. So, that's why we're going to keep stressing it.
Yeah, that's exactly why we talk about the coaching there all the time and making sure that they're balancing winning with prospect development in the most efficient way.
Yeah.
And I think, that's been part of the issue overall in Lehigh Valley this season. Mario had a question about Cutter Gauthier and what went on there, but I thought the more interesting part of his question was, do NHL teams sometimes trade away first-round draft picks without seeing that prospect play at least one HL game? If so, why?
Okay, so a few things. First thing is there was one conversation that I had today, and there's a team out there that says, hey, if a player is in his third year of college and we haven't signed him, then we're really deciding. And so that's a situation where, and we've seen that. And we've seen that in a lot of situations. There's not just one team like that. There's a bunch. And honestly, what ends up happening with that is they make that decision at the end of that third year. Then they either approach the player or not, and then that player goes and ends up going to their senior year if they don't sign them right, and they never play an NHL game with that team that drafted them, and they become a free agent for somebody else the following year when they're a senior. So that's one situation that's fairly common. I would say, happens 30% of the time, maybe 30, something like that. And then other times, look, this is why there's scouting staffs within teams. Teams can be very tough about this and just look at a guy and say, he's not going to make it. That's it. I just don't think he's going to make it. And try and trade that player to somebody else and give a fresh start. Or it's like, hey, we have no room for this guy. He's never third goalie. We just can't play him. We got two goalies here. We're going to have him for the next 10 years. Let's trade this guy. So he never plays an NHL game for him. So that's kind of like a common situation too.
Yeah, I think, the latter situation you talked about is one that you see quite a bit.
Yes.
And but I do think that, there's plenty of circumstances why this may come up, whether it's on the player side or whether it's on the team side in terms of, they've got too many of players in that position. And if they can get a good asset in return, you might as well trade them, right?
Yeah.
So I think that does come up. The last question from Mike, do you think the Stadium Series game will have more meaning than we initially expected at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, I mean, this Stadium Series game could be as meaningful as the Flyers Penguins when Giroux was still around a few years ago. So depending on how they play, if they keep it up for the next, week and change, it could have a lot of meaning because it's a 4-point swing. It's a division game.
Yeah, and the Devils are in a position where they really have to win a lot of games to get
They do.
into even the kind of position they were last year going into the playoffs. So I think that there's a lot of teams in the Metro who are itching to get one of those spots in the top three, just because of how strong the wild card kind of teams are in the Atlantic side of things.
Right.
So
Yeah. Right now, the Leafs and Detroit are causing problems for a
yeah,
lot of the Metro teams. No question.
Yeah. So I do think this Stadium Series game is going to be very important for both teams, and certainly rooting for the Flyers to be a spoiler in North Jersey there. Just a quick fun thing before we go. Matvei Michkov back in action and had a really sweet goal yesterday that included an assist from the goalie, which is always fun to
Yeah,
see.
that's fun. Yeah, I love
It
that.
was it was a tremendous pass far up the ice that led to the Michkov goal. So that was really fun to see. Uh, that will do it for today's show. We will be back tomorrow. We're going to preview Flyers versus Jets. We're going to get more from Russ at the Five Nations tournament and dig into some more prospects that are draft eligible. As a reminder, we do always want to hear from you. So if you've got a question you want us to answer on the show, you can send them via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.